Welcome back to another episode of Real Estate Exam Prep, where I break down the real estate exam so you can pass on the first try. Now, today we're going to get into part 2 of the fair housing lecture. Now, if you've missed the first part, just click on the link. It'll bring you to the first part where we go over the federal fair housing laws, the protected categories, and prohibited practices under the federal fair housing law. In this episode, we're going to get into Massachusetts-specific fair housing laws, and we're also going to get into exemptions, both on a federal level and on a state level. Now, one thing you want to be mindful of is that Massachusetts actually has stricter guidelines than the federal fair housing laws. So there's a lot more protected categories in Massachusetts than on a federal level. Now, if you look at this slide here, you'll see what they are. So on the left-hand side, you can see these are our federal protected categories. And on the right, these are all the protected categories within the state of Massachusetts. Now, we're going to break down a few of these. Some of them are very similar. We're going to break down a few of them as far as what you need to know for the exam. So the first thing we're going to review are exemptions for the federal fair housing law. Now, this is also referred to as Mrs. Murphy's Law, okay? And the premise behind this is that, picture yourself being an elderly woman and you live in a multifamily and you want to rent out one of your units. Could you be a little bit more selective as far as the type of tenant that you want? So these exemptions now have taken place to kind of fit that criteria. Now, again, two things. You can never discriminate on the basis of race. That is an illegal practice no matter what. You cannot do that. Also, if you are an owner-occupant, and that's the key, you have to live there. You have to be an owner-occupant for this to happen. But if you use a broker, if you use an agent to represent you in selling or renting your property, there are no exemptions. Under the law, agents, we have no exemptions. We have to follow everything to a T, okay? So this is only if you are renting or selling your property on your own. So the first exemption that we have is if a privately owned single family home where no broker is used and no discriminatory advertising is used, the home is owned by an individual who does not own more than 3 such homes at one time and does not sell more than one home every 2 years. So you are a non-flipper, right? So flipping houses is not your business. So if you're a non-flipper and you are selling a property, you could be a little bit more selective as far as who you are selling the property to, but you cannot advertise on what that is, right? So let's say you're looking at, you want to sell the property, you would prefer to sell it to maybe a single mom, right? You want to help them out and so forth. Well, you can't advertise that, but if that's how you made your decision and the offers that you have, then that's fine. You have that ability. So number 2, rental of rooms or units in an owner-occupied multi-dwelling for a 1 to 4 family. That's on a federal level. So on the federal level, they'll give you that exemption up to a 4 family. If you live in a property and you live in a 4 family. Providing no discrimination is shown, Massachusetts law only allows that exemption for a 2 family. Now, exemption number 3 is going to be for the sale, rental, or occupancy of dwellings owned or operated by a religious organization for other than commercial purposes to persons of that same religion if membership in that religion is not based on race, color, sex, or national origin. Exemption number 4 is going to be the rental or occupancy of lodging owned or operated by a private club for other than commercial purposes to its members only. So you can have a members only club, providing there's no discrimination in the decision making of new members. So exemption number 5 is going to be for approved senior housing. And that's going to be housing intended for or occupied by persons of 62 years or older, and those having 80% of the unit occupied by at least one person aged 55 or older, with policies and procedures demonstrating intent to provide housing for persons aged 55 or older. So we're allowed to have senior housing. Now, we're going to get into another exemption, but even with senior housing, if you do have an occupant that's under that age, you don't have to move. There is going to be an exemption for that. Sometimes we have seniors that have to, they inherit either grandchildren or something happens. Then at that point, they'll still be allowed to stay within those communities. So the Massachusetts owner-occupied exemptions are going to be very similar to the federal fair housing exemptions. So remember, Massachusetts, you're allowed that exemption on a single or 2 family home. state or federally aided elderly housing development, again, age exemption only, and then elderly retirement communities. So these are going to be communities that are designated just for seniors or retirees. We're able to do that here in Massachusetts. So on the state exam, you will see the following. This is going to be for public assistance recipients, okay? There are no exemptions for them, which means that you cannot discriminate as a landlord, as an owner, against anyone that is receiving any type of public assistance, including Section 8. And that's a huge one in Massachusetts because I still see that today advertised that landlords will not take Section 8 and so forth. That is an illegal practice. By law, if you ask a landlord, do you take Section 8? The answer is always yes, okay? So you will definitely see that on the exam. Also, you will see that any inquiries that are made if you are trying to figure out if this person is a member of any of the protected categories, that is an illegal practice as well. So let's talk about prohibited practices for public assistance and rental assistance recipients. So number one, to discriminate in furnishing credit services or renting accommodations to them. To discriminate because of any requirement of such public assistance, rental assistance, or housing subsidy. Discriminatory advertising. Refusal to sign a subsidized housing program lease. Refusal to make modifications in a unit to satisfy the state sanitary code. Or requiring a security deposit that's more than what the law allows. So remember, familial status is also protected federally. It's also protected here in Massachusetts as well. We're going to get into prohibited practices of familial status or the presence of children in Massachusetts. So number one, refusal to rent, sell, or otherwise deny occupancy based upon children. Number two, discrimination in terms and condition. Number three, discriminating advertising. That's saying no children allowed. And the last one, this is a big one. I hear about this all the time as an agent. Refusal to rent based on the presence of lead paint or other safety concerns. This is a misconception that a lot of landlords have. They feel that if they know there's lead paint in the property, that they're trying to protect the family and the children, right? They just can't afford to de-lead or they don't want to de-lead. And they think that by not renting to that family, it's going to help them. That is an illegal practice. As a landlord, you cannot tell someone, I am not going to rent to you because I have lead in the property and I fear that your child, or if you're expecting, can get lead poison. Cannot do that. And we'll get into what happens, how to file a discrimination case in those circumstances. Now, there are some exemptions when it comes to children if you're not owner occupied. So number one, dwellings of 1 to 3 units to which is occupied by an elderly or infirmed occupant for whom children would be a hardship. So you have someone, living on the first floor, perhaps the elderly, infirm. You have a second floor unit that's open and children would be a hardship for that person. Then at that point, you do have that exemption, but you cannot advertise that ever. If you are temporarily renting your primary residence, you have that exemption. If you're owner occupied and you're leasing a unit in your property, as long as it's no more than 2 units, then you have that exemption. And the last one is going to be more for larger buildings. This is going to be private housing of 100 units or more in which the number of children equal 50% of the number of units, and certain services have to be offered at that point. Now, let's get into groups that are not in the protected category that legally you can discriminate against, okay? Number one, illegal drug use. You can discriminate against that. Registered sex offenders. Number 3, smoking or smokers, including vaping. They're not protected. Number 4, students. Now, when we hear students, we're talking about college students, not elementary students or anything like that. So yes, college students, you can discriminate against that. You can put, no college students. That is, you have the right to do that. So the 5th one is going to be pets or animals. And the only exemption to that is if it's a service animal. And we'll discuss that at a later time. Now, what if you're a victim of housing discrimination? How can you file a case? Well, there's 2 ways, right? So in Massachusetts, you're first going to have to file with MCAT. MCAT is the Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination. They're based out in Springfield. Now, they handle all discrimination, whether it's housing or employment. So if you are going to file a complaint with MCAT, you have to make sure you do so within 12 months of the alleged violation. So you have 12 months to file that complaint. After 12 months, statute of limitations kick in and you won't be able to file a complaint. If it's an employee-related type discrimination, you have 300 days from the time from the date that occurred. So civil penalties under MCAD, you have $10,000 for the first offense, $25,000 for the second offense within a 5-year period, and $50,000 for the third offense within a 7-year period. So if you'd like to file a complaint on a federal level, you're going to do that with HUD, and that's the Department of Housing and Urban Development. That is the federal entity. Now, there's guidelines behind that if you're going to file a complaint with HUD. So if you are going to file a complaint with HUD or any U.S. District Court, you have 1 year from the alleged violation to file that claim. After that, you won't be able to do so. HUD may ask you or require you to file with your state first and see if your state can square that away. If they can't, then you can move back to federal court. A lot of folks like to go with federal court because you can kind of get more from them as far as winning the case. So Massachusetts, under Mass General Law 151B, equal opportunity, requires that brokers have this emblem in their place of business, okay? Now, it states here that it's required that every real estate or rental agency must place in a conspicuous place. That means that it's easily visible, that when you first walk into an office, you should be able to see this sign fairly easily. You're not walking through and have to look behind a wall or open up a book or whatever it is, that it should be very visible to you. So they must place in a conspicuous place a notice from the Massachusetts Commission of Discrimination and Fair Housing Practices, and that is this emblem. Now, I'll tell you, you will get an exam question where it'll ask you, what if you walk into a brokerage and they do not have this? What can you expect? The answer is, well, you can expect not to be treated equally. So there you have it, folks. That is the Massachusetts Fair Housing Laws, very similar to the federal fair housing laws, but we do have some extra categories in Massachusetts. Make sure that you are well versed in this. You're going to see a lot of this on the exam. You're going to see a lot of it on the national exam and on the state exam. Okay, so you really need to know, you want to know the ins and outs of this. If you haven't seen the national one that I did, I'll leave the link below. Click on it. That's going to be, it's a bigger video because we do get into the prohibited practices. We start talking about staring, redlining, and blockbusting, which I promise you, you're going to see on the exam. Okay, any questions, comments, leave them below. And I hope to see you in class.